Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Extra Shift. I'm Chris, here as always with Brendon. How are we going?
Good. Yeah, it's been a fun couple of weeks since we last talked. I think we last talked after the end of the Cup final, and it was a very quick turnaround to the draft and free agency. So we've got quite a lot to talk about, considering it's only been 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, the cup final ended, and everyone immediately turned around and headed towards Vegas for.
It was like 2 days later or something that the draft was.
It's one of the first times when Florida turned up. It's one of the first times that anyone's turned up to Vegas with a hangover. Didn't need to leave Vegas with a hangover. They had it when they got there.
Well, I like that. Apparently, it was such a short turnaround that some teams, rather than trying to get a flight out of Vegas after the draft on Sunday, set up shop in Vegas for the start of free agency.
Yeah, there were some teams that just decided that was their base for.
Yeah, we'll just hire an office and whatever, and we'll work here.
Yes, so it was like, that's fair. So
I mean, it sounded like it was chaos trying to get out of Vegas like that night too. Like a bunch of.
And it also the other big thing was apparently there was a variant of COVID going around, but which wasn't respiratory in nature. It was a gastro version.
Ooh.
So gastro COVID. That's what that sounds like a weird sort of disco thing. Hey everybody, it's gastro COVID.
That's a band name in the making.
That's completely a band name. You'll hear them performing it like Splendor and Laneway in no time. But anyway,
that's right. Well, it is episode 210. We made it 210.
Now, obviously, we do the numbers first. So there's when we look at numbers, I look at are there any intriguing numbers for me? Are there any San Jose Shark legends that I can call upon? My favorite thing instead this time is I'm going to focus on the fact that we have a Kansas City scout, Guy Sharon, Kansas City scout. I'm very much into today is very much for me about all of these forgotten teams and stuff like that, because we're going to do a bunch of stuff in the off season. I've got a lot of stuff planned in the off season involving forgotten teams and forgotten leagues. And anyone who remembers that we did the WHA dive a couple of seasons ago, got a couple of other things a bit similar in mind. Maybe even watching an old Avco Cup final, because I've got a couple of those. So there's a couple of ideas that I've got where we might do something a bit with some forgotten teams. That, and I've also been blasting Brass Bonanza all day for no apparent reason. That's the interesting part of this. So you've got the Kansas City Scouts there, obviously, with that. You've got a couple, the Atlanta Flames, obviously. But also there is a San Jose Sharks legend currently in contract negotiations, and I say negotiations like he's not in arbitration, Ty Delandra. So
there's actually a bunch of guys on this list that got new contracts. Bobby Brink, there's obviously Ty Delandra is still there, Anthony Duclair, Valerio Shevchenko, Alexander Holtz, a bunch of guys that move teams or have new contracts or in the process of getting new contracts right now. So we've got a lot to talk about.
And we've also talked about, like, the thing is as well, for anyone who's sitting there going, oh, but you haven't mentioned Ron Francis, you haven't mentioned Marion Gaborik. This is the third time through.
This is the third time around. We mentioned them the first time.
We did George Armstrong at great depth for you.
Don't worry about it.
We've done them.
Just go back 2 years and see the last one.
We can still find things to talk about. We don't just have to do Pavel Bure. Okay? Yeah. We can still find other things. And the other things involve trivia. Now, Brendon hasn't looked this up.
Yeah.
But the trivia today I thought was quite tricky, but I sort of mentioned beforehand vaguely what the question might be. I think he thinks he might have it. So I'm going to really push him on this one.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting.
46 players in the history of the NHL have been drafted at 210. Of those, 13 have played games. Of those, 2 have played over 1,000. Name one of them.
So I realized my immediate first instinct, and I think this is the case. Some reason the number 210 stuck in my head. I'm sure I've seen it mentioned on broadcast before about a particular player, and I think it's Henrik Zetterberg. And actually, this jersey right here in the middle, that Red Wings jersey, completely accidentally, that's a Henrik Zetterberg jersey.
It is Henrik Zetterberg. It is indeed Henrik Zetterberg. Henrik Zetterberg has, of course, 1,082. He is not the player, however, that has played the most.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm trying to
So the
think
other
of
one-
who could be the other one,
So the
because
other one-
that's like 2010. 210 is 7th round. I'm pretty sure.
Yes. So here's the other thing. Well, when this player was drafted, it was the 15th round. So
okay.
they were drafted.
Right, so that's a long time ago.
They were drafted by two teams in the same year because of the WHA. So they were drafted 113th by the Houston Aeros in the WHA.
Oh, wow.
And they were drafted at 210 by the LA Kings in the NHL. They did not go to the WHA, and they instead played their entire career with the Kings, finishing up in 1993, 1994.
Oh, gosh.
They are also, if I have my records right, and I believe I have my records right, they are also, what number are they? They're in right wing scoring, their 28th career all time.
Oh wow! Look, my like early '90s LA Kings knowledge is very limited.
Well, I'm disappointed with that personally.
I'm gonna try and think of like who it could possibly be.
The answer is Dave Taylor. So
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no,
Dave Taylor, 1,111 games, 1,111.
Yeah.
431 goals, 638 assists, for 1,069 points. And in the playoffs, 92 playoff games, 26 goals, 33 assists for 59 points.
Pretty good.
And was quite good for them in that sort of early 90s phase when they got decent because they had some weird Canadian kid on their team. So yeah, but Dave Taylor, who's actually, interestingly enough, if you look through the numbers and go through what achievements and where they are, Taylor's probably got a better Hall of Fame argument than Zetterberg. Genuinely, I'd say Taylor's got a better Hall of Fame argument than Zetterberg does.
Possible.
But it'll be interesting to say. Obviously, Zetterberg popped up this year. He could have popped up a couple of years ago, but because he didn't retire.
It's one of those contracts that was technically still on the books for a bit.
So he was eligible this year, but didn't get in, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think obviously in that kind of pantheon of Detroit players, like I think that there's a more sentimental argument for Zetterberg than there is, from a stats perspective, like Datsuk and so forth. Obviously, a very good player, but probably not quite in that same echelon of talent.
Yes. So let's get into the first thing we need to talk about. The first thing we need to talk about is the draft. Now, this year was going to do a draft coverage, didn't end up doing a draft coverage or a free agency coverage, largely because the draft this year kind of had a bit of a feeling to it that either everything was going to happen or nothing was going to happen.
Yeah, I kind of had the vibe that like it was probably not going to be that busy. And look, I think it ended up being a lot of trades, but I was 99% of them were pick trades.
To be honest as well, though, the really interesting part about those trades that we were talking about was, and I don't like it when it gets too. I really genuinely don't like it when conversations get too Toronto centric. But realistically, the draft was only going to blow up if Marner moved.
Mm-hmm.
And if Marner wasn't going to move, the draft wasn't going to blow up because nobody was going to move anybody else. So it was either going to be there was a Mitch Marner trade in the wind and that was going to happen, or everyone was pretty much going to sit and maybe move some numbers around. The Sharks got aggressive the day before and jumped up a couple of spots, which I was kind of happy with. If you remember when we were talking about us winning the lottery, I think on that episode I predicted that I thought the Sharks would jump up using that one of their second rounders and that other first, and I thought they'd go up to get a defenseman, which is what they did. So, I think I'd like to thank the GM for bringing me on board.
Right?
Look, he's just adding me to the list of former Sharks. Look, the Sharks have become the old boys club now, and I know I've got all over Edmonton for it, but if Edmonton can do it and every other club can do it, why the hell can't the Sharks? Damn it. Like, the Sharks have been adding to their front office, and pretty much it's basically people that have played for the Sharks and people that played with Mike Greer. They added Ryan Clough this week as his assistant GM. And, of course, Joe Thornton has the prescribed role of Jumbo.
Yeah, that's it.
Which I loved when they said to Mike Greer, so what's Joe's official role within the organization? And he's like, Jumbo, vibes.
Yeah,
he comes in.
He just hangs around.
He does what I want him to do. And at some point, I'll probably have to give him a title. Look, he's completely going to end up as special assistant to the general manager.
I mean, that sounds like a fantastic job. Like, if I could turn up each day and just Jumbo at that, like, I
could be Jumbo. Like, if my job could be to turn up and be Jumbo, I would just turn up and be Jumbo. Like, that's fantastic. That's easy. But look, obviously, my whole thoughts on the NHL draft are Macklin Celebrini and how good that is and how wonderful that is. And it's so nice to hear everyone talk about the fact that the Sharks really, it would be an absolute massive upset if Celebrini doesn't turn out. There's always a chance to draft. It's a crapshoot. Yeah. But, you hear some of the comparables and you hear them talk about quality of players, and they're like, a lot of the feedback that I heard from a lot of different people, some analytics, some eye test people, and they're all like, McDavid and Matthews, you definitely have taken over him. Everyone else, he's kind of in that next mix of he's the next guy you'd take. Him and Bedard are sort of – Bedard's probably a little bit up in terms of maybe instant, but they're like – Celebrini looks like he's probably got that athleticism about him. And he's not small. He's not a small guy.
No, it's honestly it's nice just to have some, exciting young player to watch. Like,
yeah. And I was even
if you're going to still like not be, a playoff team or whatever immediately, like it's nice to be able to watch that and kind of go, oh, okay, there's going to be a bunch of fun shit next year. It's like, the Blackhawks season. Like,
well, I've been playing with
watching that game just to see Bedard play.
I've been playing with the Puckpedia, the Puckpedia version of the former cap-friendly rebuild stuff and the GM tools. I really like them, by the way. They're quite good. But because they also allow you to do trades and add people to the roster. So you can go in and add and make trades and move people onto the roster. And I put together, like, there's a Sharks roster that I put together. And we've actually got a lot of bodies now. But we could realistically put a lineup on the ice, except for the fact that it would not meet the salary cap under any way, shape, or form. We could ice a top 6 of players now that are all on entry-level deals and quality and would develop quite well. Now, they're not going to do that to them. No. But Celebrini, and I'll mention it now, but we'll talk a bit more, obviously, about it in the signings. But Celebrini signed his ELC. He and Will Smith are both coming out of college and will be with the Sharks next year. There's no way they send them down to the Barracuda. That's not happening.
I like that Will Smith is wearing number 2. Like, I think that's it's very rare to see a forward wearing such a low number these days.
Outside of that, and the Sharks, again, the Sharks had their choice of defensemen. I probably would have gone where the Wild went. Williams, he's a killer. But I'm happy with Dickinson. I'm happy with him. He was one of the best rated defensemen in the draft. Outside of that, again, the Wild killed it with their pick. It was pretty straightforward. There weren't that many teams that the Flyers did what the Flyers do, and like they either jump up and take a home run pick early, or they jump up and take someone about 15 spots too early, which is kind of what they did in this draft. Also, for Toronto fans, it wasn't just Kyle Dubas. Toronto traded back. Can't blame Dubas for this one. He traded back.
He wasn't even there.
He wasn't even there, man. He wasn't even there.
I liked that the Penguins didn't have a pick in the first round, so they just sent Mike Sullivan for some reason just to be there doing like an interview with. I don't understand why they even.
He wanted to see the Sphere.
Yeah, pretty much. Look, I mean, the Sphere thing looked interesting. That was a
the Sphere was cool.
It was a cool kind of gimmick to have, and clearly they at times were delaying just for the purpose of showing off things in the Sphere.
The Sharks' first overall pick, and people are like, why are the Sharks making us wait? And I'm like, You don't think that Gary Bettman didn't go to Mike Greer and go,
Just
we all
hold
know
on a few minutes. Yeah.
we've paid for this.
Yeah.
We've got first overall graphics to go up on the screen.
Yeah. We're gonna take the whole 3 hours, bud.
James Dolan is not giving us this venue for cheap.
No.
Like, and that was what came out as well, that James Dolan made the NHL pay absolute full price for this.
I liked a little little detail of having like a Vegas showgirl taking everyone's jackets as they came up to get the, it was just this tiny little Vegas detail in there that was a nice little, and you got to see the inside of everyone's like jacket that had like photos printed on it and everything.
I also thought that the moment of the draft was Beckett Seneke when he got drafted by Anaheim, who literally jaw open looks at his parents and went, shit. And it's just like, you are everyone. You are absolutely everyone. I also love that when they were doing the comparables and they were working out who the different comparable players are. And when they got to looking at Columbus, they went, the best one that we've got for Columbus's pick this year is Adam Fantilli. So they've kind of now got the same player twice. But overall, look, it was a pretty straightforward draft. Not many big moves at the draft. Nobody really went out there and traded big players, which is disappointing. They had a goal horn.
Yeah.
Gary wanted them to use the horn. Like, Gary wanted the trade horn.
He got it a few times, but it was just like, oh, we're moving back one pick, or we're moving back,
the Sharks jumped up. Team moved back one, and the team's moving back one, and Gary's on stage. You can see him looking over at the guy going, now.
I mean, look, there were a few guys who slid, and I understand some of them, and it's always the way. There's always someone that goes 10, 15 spots later than you expect. But I don't think that there was anything that was a huge, shock or surprise in this year's draft.
No, I mean, look, Celebrini Demidov 1-2 was going to be a thing.
Yeah,
like that was where we were going to go. Before we get into the trades and stuff like that, we talked about it the other day that it was likely that it was going to happen, but officially Jessica Campbell has been hired by Dan Boelsma as an assistant coach. That's the first official full-time female assistant coach in the NHL. And
that makes it the NHL the last of the four, major sports to have a woman in that role, which is it's a celebration, and at the same time it's fantastic that she's there, but it's also disappointing to be the last.
Yeah, there's been a couple in like the NFL, for example. I'm a 49ers fan in the NFL, and like Katie Sowers has been with the 49ers for a few years now. She left last year, but she was really good. And obviously then in the NBA, there was all the talk that Popovich's assistant was she was going to take over, but he just won't retire. So, then she went off to the Aces, I think, in the WNBA. So let's get into some trades. So we have a trade to announce. I think you're going to want to hear. Well, Gary didn't get to do it, so I've got to. All right. So the big one sort of, and these are not in any chronological order. They're just more in an interesting conversational way to put them.
Yeah, they're slightly roughly in the newest to the oldest, but it's not quite.
So the big one that was very recent, Buffalo acquires Ryan McLeod and Tyler Tullio from Edmonton for Matthew Savoie. So Matthew Savoie has been very highly touted. There were a lot of people talking about this season. They expected that he'd probably be it's a really interesting trade. There are a lot of people who are like, yeah, he's okay, he's a prospect. And there are a lot of people who spend a lot of time with the prospects who are like, no, this was his year. He was going to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he set some pretty big, records, in junior last year. He'd had some injury issues in the past couple of years, which, I think set him back a little bit from kind of what people were maybe expecting at a certain time. But he bounced back in a big way in the last year, and this was probably the year that he was going to, have a chance to make the NHL team and make a kind of a real impact there. It's interesting. Like there's definitely people who are less convinced about his immediate transition to the NHL and have concerns about his game translating to the NHL and so forth. But obviously it's very rare to see a top 10 pick get traded within a couple of years of the draft. Usually there's a lot of rope, there's a lot of time. So it's interesting to see Buffalo giving up on him so quickly, I guess, for what is effectively a young third line center and a B prospect. Ryan McLeod, I think, isn't chopped liver in this. He's 24 years old. He's put up some good numbers in Edmonton, and I think that there's a lot of Edmonton fans who don't necessarily like him because he isn't the most offensively gifted, or is a bit more of a perimeter player, isn't as physical as they like for it to have a third line center, but he puts up. But basically, for a team that we talk about in Edmonton that have such a lack of depth, a lack of quality to bottom six forwards, he was basically kind of the best of that bunch in terms of young, cost controlled, actually puts up good numbers, good results away from playing with either McDavid or Draisaitl, which is very rare on an Edmonton team over the last few years. Yeah, this is basically kind of the one guy that they've had kind of come up through their system and has actually been a good player that can eat up some of the small amount of time on the ice that McDavid and Draisaitl aren't there.
There's been a lot of people who have talked about this idea of the Ryan Nugent-Hopkins revolution and the fact that Nuge has found his game again. But look at where Nuge has found his game again. He's not playing third line center. He's playing on Draisaitl's wing.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about they've got Nuge working, as a winger, which is not what he's there for. He's supposed to be your third line center. You're right. He's been able to have some production away from the big two. So I'm interested to see. I think, look, I feel like this is, and people who know me will be wow, you're praising Edmonton. I feel like this is a home run for Edmonton. My main reason behind that is as well, I think that if someone's close to what they think he's going to be and what he should be, they've just got a young player still on easy cap controlled contract, which they needed desperately, who can possibly give you that level of production on a third line at this point, and you're not paying the money, which is really important. We'll sort of mention it now, so because we're not really going to go into it because we don't want to talk about them again. But the NHL very quietly, in a dump just before the draft, reinstated Stan Bowman and also Joel Quenneville. And the rumor was immediately that Edmonton have plans to appoint Stan Bowman as their general manager. Now, no, please don't. And the Edmonton fans, to be fair, have all come out and gone, no, do not do this.
Especially since they've been making a bunch of good moves lately.
Jeff Jackson should just keep the job.
Yeah, I'm impressed with
I thought his free agency work has been quite good so far.
Yeah, I find it very difficult to criticize anything he's done so far.
No, the funny part about it does remain the fact that there's a very big rumor going around that he has tried to get Evander Kane to waive his no move, which, as I said to you the other day, was going to be the funniest part of this offseason because they were going to try to get Evander Kane to waive. And anyone who's ever dealt with Evander Kane knows full well he's not waiving that. He's not helping you. So they're going to be stuck with Evander Kane. So they'll fill things in around him. It'll be interesting to see how that goes this year because he's going to slide down that lineup if he doesn't take a deal, and we know what happens when he slides down a lineup. But I can't criticize them at the moment. I think they're doing really well. So they don't need to go and get old hockey dude again, and especially not old hockey dude who was banned because he put winning over everything else. So I kind of feel like that sends the wrong message, but we'll see what Edmonton do. Maybe the backlash has been big enough. And they'll turn around and tell us that they never planned on hiring Stan Bowman and they don't know who leaked that. Them is the answer to that question. So next up, we have Robbie Fabry. So Robbie Fabry is acquired. Anaheim goes to Anaheim and a 2025 fourth from Detroit for Gage Alexander.
Pretty much cap dump, really. At this point, like obviously Anaheim's one of the teams with a significant amount of cap space. They also pick up Brian Gillen from Seattle for a 2026 fourth. I think it's basically like I don't mind those pickups for them necessarily. Like
I still like Robbie Fabry. Like I feel like the issue for Robbie Fabry was that Robbie Fabry got paid for winning a cup and was going to be paid too much because everyone who won that cup got paid too much.
Yeah.
And he was one of the ones who got paid too much, then got moved to Detroit, then got moved. Now he's moved again. And like, I think that's been his bigger issue. Not so much that he's not decent. Like I like Robbie Fabry. I think that gives Anaheim some ability and also, again, someone who knows what the hell they're doing. Same with Brian Dumoulin. They kind of need some experienced guys in Anaheim that know, because like everybody talking about the Sharks and how bad the Sharks were last season, and we were terrible. But we covered up a lot of problems for the Ducks because nobody was paying attention to just how horrendous the Ducks were. Like, and they should have taken a step. That was the difference. We were expecting to be rubbish. The Ducks should have taken a step, and they didn't quite take the step. And I think, look, the Ducks have still got a lot of moves, I think, to come. I don't think they're done yet.
Yeah. I think that they've got well, it's weird because like clearly they're going to have to send down a bunch of guys because they currently have a relatively full roster, but a lot of those are guys on ELCs. I imagine that they'll try and sign some of the remaining free agents. There isn't a heap of exciting free agents left out there at this point in time, but they still have a pretty massive amount of cap space. I suspect that they will wait a little while for teams who still need to dump cap, and try and take on picks for anyone who's willing to give up picks to get rid of a player.
I think they're waiting for that. They don't have. See, this is the other thing too, where Anaheim has it over San Jose at the moment, is Anaheim doesn't have any buyouts or any bury cap. So they've got the ability to buy out. They've got the ability to bury cap. They can take hits. They're not in a position like San Jose's got no flexibility in terms of extra contracts coming onto the books. So they've just got to take the contract, which is fine because they're under the cap by a mile. But I think the other interesting part there is that like Anaheim's still having these weird conversations around trading, I mean, John Gibson's name keeps coming up again. I think that horse is realistically bolted, but I still wouldn't be shocked if somebody trades for John Gibson. I think they might. Yeah. But you're also hearing those weird conversations around up front, and are they going to move one of their big players? Like, I don't know why. I can't work that out for the life of me, why there would be conversations involving, the word.
I guess it depends on who they are. Like, if they go another year of just being mediocre and they decide that it's a failed rebuild, do they start again? Like, I don't know how long they can continue to do that.
Well, you've heard whispers about Trevor Zegras.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I wouldn't move off that.
No.
Like, I wouldn't move off that. Like, that seems stupid to me. But it depends on what you're getting back for it as well if you're Anaheim. But I don't know. St. Louis then went out and acquired Mateo Joseph from Ottawa for future considerations and Radek Faska from Dallas for future considerations.
A lot of future considerations going around with St. Louis.
So many future considerations.
Yeah. There's I think there's more coming up too, but there are. Yeah, they're a lot involved in that. I think it's interesting because I wasn't really necessarily expecting St. Louis to be a team with a heap of cap space to take on guys. But I guess they didn't re-sign some of their free agents, and
they sent you one contract.
Yeah, that's it.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I mean, fine. They're players. They're serviceable. They're quite fine. They're not brilliant, but they're there.
I think that's fine for what
Yeah. The Rangers acquired Riley Smith at 25% retained from Pittsburgh for a 2025 fifth and a 2027 second. The fact we're already in 2027 picks.
I know it's shocking. It's an interesting one. Like Riley Smith, I think had 1 year left on his deal. He got picked up from Pittsburgh last year from Vegas as a cap dump essentially for free. So Yeah, I think it sounds like he maybe wasn't necessarily happy there. Things started pretty well for Riley Smith at the start of the season. It seemed like he was a really good fit, and then it just kind of immediately fell off after that, and it just kind of didn't seem to work out for him. I think he's still a really good player. He's a weird player too that seems to have like a really good season, then a really bad season, then a really good season, then a really bad season. If you look at his,
Yeah, the numbers are weird.
it's real strange. He just has these like weird like shooting fluctuations that he'll shoot at a normal rate and then he'll shoot at a bad rate. So like if you look at this, like let's go back to his time on Florida. This is kind of what got him like trade taken from Florida to Vegas and stuff. So one year he puts up 50 points and shoots 14.5. The next year on Florida he puts up 37 points and shoots 9.4. He goes to Vegas and then suddenly he's shooting 13.6. He gets back up to 60 points. He takes a little dip. He goes to 53, 54. His shooting percentage goes to 10 to 16 to 11 to 14 to 8. Like it's insane. Like it's just this 5% shooting fluctuation every year on and off. So he's due for another 15-16% shooting percentage next year on New York. So I'm fully expecting him to put up 60 points there.
And I mean, I was looking at the stat before that in his last 15 games, he got 1 goal.
Yeah.
Like, so he was on the tail end of that sort of, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I don't think he was happy in Pittsburgh.
Look, I think the Rangers are really, we talked about this a little bit when they got eliminated. The Rangers are a fascinating conversation. They're still a fascinating conversation. When we get into the free agents, or actually, we'll talk about it now while we're here.
Yeah.
So
we don't have a heap to talk about them in the free agents, so we may as well.
One of the biggest possible trades hasn't happened. Still hasn't happened. I still feel like it's going to happen. Who knows when, though? So Trouba they've pressured Jacob Trouba to try to waive. He's got to put his 15-team list in. It's almost like everyone, when they signed that contract, said that was a dumb contract. And the Rangers went, no, and gave him the captaincy to double down on it. And then sure enough, it's not a great contract. Detroit fans are salivating at this idea of Trouba's going to come in and be the savior, which I don't know if you've watched him play. He elbows people in the head, and that's kind of it.
That's kind of his deal. Yeah,
it's kind of what he does. He will do a couple of things that are okay, and then he'll elbow somebody in the head and get suspended for a bit. And he's guaranteed to cost you in the playoffs. But I've had a couple of Detroit fans who were like, "Nah, Trouba's the answer in the future." No, I wouldn't say so. But the Rangers went to try to get him to give his list in. He knew what the trade was. So the rumor was he put Detroit on the no-trade list, knowing that was where they were going. There was also a suggestion they were going to move him onto waivers for the purposes of, put him on waivers and someone to claim him. But they didn't do that because I think basically the gist was no one was going to buy him out.
Yeah.
So I was going to claim him on waivers. I don't think anyone would claim him on waivers. I think he'd get through. Probably.
It's an interesting one because, like, I've heard that a lot of the issue isn't necessarily so much him not willing to play somewhere else, but so much of an issue of like his wife. The reason that he wanted to be, in that immediate vicinity in the New York area, that got him, there in the first place, was, his wife and her livelihood is based around that area. And the reality is,
her nursing residency is based out of New York, and she can't go elsewhere with it.
It's just kind of, it's interesting to see. We talk so much about players moving around and their families having to deal with it and stuff. And the one time that, a player actually uses, their negotiated rights in their contract, whether it, you consider it a good deal or not, to, protect the livelihood of their family, all of a sudden it's like, oh, how unreasonable that,
And that's the thing. My issue with the Trouba thing and not taking the trade isn't Trouba. My issue with that is that the Rangers should never have given it to him in the first place.
This is the result. This is what happens.
You give, and again, I speak from experience of a team that gave out far too many no move clauses for players that shouldn't have one. One of whom is going to be on our defense next year because he has to be. But the problem is if you give out too many no moves and you give out everybody gets a clause where everyone controls all of that stuff, you're going to get bitten by it eventually. And the problem is Trouba's contract is far too big for that Rangers roster and what it is. As we've also said, next season, they've got the big contract coming up. The really big contract is coming up.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to pay a goalie a lot of money. Probably the highest paid goalie in the league by the time he's done. I have absolutely no doubt that by the time Igor's contract is done, he's the highest paid goalie in the league. So they're going to have to pay Igor, or they're going to move him. And if they move him, I think they're done. So that's a tacit admission that they're done. They've also got, like Lindgren's in arbitration for them at the moment as well. That won't come in massively cheap. They've got problems, and Trouba moving out will alleviate a lot of the problems. So maybe they have to find a team that's in the vicinity that might take him on, so that he doesn't have to move. Do you want to see if Lil Lamoriello wants a firstborn and send him to the island? I mean, he doesn't have to move. I mean, just saying. I don't know what you do there, but yeah. So I still think that trade's going to happen. I just think that they've got to sit down with Trouba and go, what's the best way to do this? What's the way that's going to help you out? Because they can't do what they normally do, which is just send him to Tampa, because that's what they always do.
Tampa's on this phase.
Send the captain of the Rangers to Tampa. So Washington, who had a really good draft/free agency run here. I thought they did a really good job. Jakob Chychrun from Ottawa for Nick Jensen and a 2026 third. Acquiring cap friendly for the extra stats. I mean, who knew? That's a good start. I'm also going to add in here, I'll do the Washington while we're at it. They also got Logan Thompson in from Vegas for a 2024 third and a 2025 third.
There was a trade around that. I missed that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a free agency signing.
Yeah, that was trade. So that's decent business.
I think that they did well. Obviously, like, that's piggybacking off the fact that they previously sent out Darcy Kemper. They kind of freed up that. There was kind of this expectation that maybe that meant, like, Charlie Lindgren, had the starter position. I think there's a bit of a 1A 1B situation there now between Thompson and Lindgren. I'll be interested to see how that kind of plays out for them over the next year.
I still don't like the PLD deal, but the rest of their deals have been good.
Yeah, I think it's they've got an interesting situation in their defense now with adding Chychrun, that like they have a lot of money locked up in that, in basically effectively like 8 guys, and I don't think that they can send any of them down. So I don't know if there's another move coming in terms of moving out one of those players, or if there's an expectation that someone's not going to be available for a while or whatever. Like they have literally like 8 NHL defensemen on their roster right now, and I think that they can't fit them all, and they're currently over the cap. So we'll see kind of what the other shoe is to drop for Washington, and whether or not they're a significantly better team. But like, given the limited options that they had coming into this offseason, I think that they've done pretty well to make some moves around the edges, considering the lack of options they have.
Yeah, I think they did. I think they did a decent job of going from what the hell is this roster to okay. Yeah, okay, I can see something.
Like, all right, this is an improvement, and like they snuck into the playoffs last year. You could say that it's through a bit of luck, but they were there.
Hang on a minute. Rewind that for a moment. Where the Penguins fan goes, you could say it was through.
No, we talked about this like two or 3 episodes ago when they made the playoffs.
Penguins went, here, would you like to be in the playoffs?
Yeah, please. And before that, they won that like unsustainable amount of 1-goal games. They had like 20 overtime points or something like that. Where
last day where nobody who should have won, and
effectively they got in because the rest of the Metro sucked. They shouldn't realistically, have been in that position that they were, and props to them. I don't know whether they're a significantly better team. I think that they could have a worse record this year than they did last year, and that be technically like a better team.
Yeah, they could definitely regress and also move forward at the same time. I think they're going to be a bizarre team this year. I don't quite know. As I said, I'm still not convinced the PLD thing works, but we'll find out. So Tampa then acquired the rights to Jake Gensel for a 2025 third and then signed into 7 years at $9 million. That's, look, if you're going to replace Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't fault them on that. Obviously, it sounds like the option was sign Stamkos at $8 million when he, until he's like 45 years old, or sign a 28-year-old. I think Jake Gensel off the top of my head, until he's 35. I think I would take Jake Gensel, 10 days out of the week.
It's also was a really interesting narrative around this too, because there's been a lot of conversations around what winning teams do. There's also been a lot of conversations around this idea of hockey loyalty. Those two things don't work together. Now, there are a lot of people who came out and went, Stamkos did them a bunch of solids by taking reduced money all the way through and took less money to get them through. This is where they should have rewarded him and given him something that he wanted. They don't have to. No. And if you're a player and you leave the money on the table, that can happen to you. And if a team decides that they want to go on and they're like, you know what, we could get a player who's younger than you, who will be around longer than you are and doesn't have the injury history that you do, we can do that. And you can just walk and go get your money somewhere else. And there's a bunch of people crying loyalty about Stamkos. And while I would have loved to have seen him stay with them, have you seen Tampa? Like,
yeah, it's
who is the other? Who is the other? If you want to talk about the two pillars traditionally of Tampa,
yeah,
Stamkos is one. Who was the other one?
Yeah, I mean Stamkos and Hedman.
But before that, who was the god in Tampa before that? Marty.
Marty St. Louis. Yeah.
And what did they do to Marty St. Louis?
Yeah, that's it. This is not a team of loyalty.
Out of town on a rail, go enjoy New York for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is like if you want to look at what happens to paying someone for past success and after a cup win or whatever. Look at Washington. Washington paid Ovechkin and Backstrom, significant raises after that for the back ends of their career. Backstrom played like one more year of that. Ovechkin, obviously had a big fall off in the last year and, still has a couple of years left on that deal.
Tom Wilson's contract is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Like, they got swept in the first round. Like, this is what happens. This, the Tampa doesn't want to be in that position.
We were talking about it before. What happened to St. Louis? St. Louis won the cup and gave everyone money.
Yeah.
And then we're like,
yeah, Chicago did it too. Like those Taves and Kane contracts, those $10.5 million, whatever.
Yeah, we won the cup, but we're not very good now because we paid everybody.
Teams don't generally win after that.
No, you've got to be clever enough to go, look, if you want to keep this band together, you're going to do X. If you're not going to do X, we'll find someone else.
Yeah, we've got someone else in free agency that we'll replace you with.
Toronto have decided to fix their aging rickety defense by bringing in the youngster that is Chris Tanev. Look, I actually think it's a really good signing. Tanev from Dallas for Max Ellis and a 2026 seventh. Look, signing to a 6-year, $4.5 million contract. I don't particularly like the deal because
I don't think they'll back a couple of years. They're probably going to be great. And he's probably going to drop off at some point in the near future. But there wasn't a better option out there for them.
The conversation was that they were going to give him a long deal and not pay him a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
And what they ended up doing was both. And I still think that it's a little bit rich. If you're going to give him 6 years, I think that's a little bit rich for it because look, they're going to bury it at the end. We all know he's not getting to 6. They're going to bury it at about 4. I think it gives them a better back end, but I think that also says a lot about their back end as it currently
stands. Yeah, they've basically reworked their decor, and we'll talk about that with some of their signings. I don't know that makes it incredible all of a sudden, but it's they did something with it.
And it's not just because I'm wearing the Dangle Navy shirt today. I'm very much on Steve Dangle's wavelength with regards to what the hell Toronto's doing right now, where he is absolutely losing his mind that they're going to run it back again on the basis of everyone talked about you've got to just move it, 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 you've got to just move it. And then, oh no, we're going to keep everybody and we're just going to bring them all back again. So we'll talk about that when we get to the signings and stuff like that and what they've had to do there. Vegas, go out and get Alexander Holtz and Akira Schmid from New Jersey for Paul Cotter and a 2025 third. Schmid's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Holtz is interesting too in terms of, this was a guy who had high expectations, reasonable
Well,
pedigree.
Holtz was
That
one of the names mentioned for the in San Jose for the trade, and they wouldn't trade him.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I think that, this was supposed to be, future top six guy that for some reason just couldn't stick in New Jersey this year. And, obviously they're a very deep forward team and they probably weren't going to free up a spot for him in the future. It's an odd one to me. I don't know why they gave up on him for that return. I guess that they decided that it wasn't going to work out. They saw something with him that wasn't going to work out. But Schmidt is an interesting add to Vegas's goalie situation. Both teams, I guess, have made pretty significant changes to their goalie roster between Vegas and New Jersey this year.
I mean, New Jersey basically feels like they just filled up and went, "We just got no room for you." And
yeah, they basically threw out their entire goalie roster and started fresh. That's basically it. Vegas
I think that Schmidt is the sort of player that's going to go to Vegas and perform. I think that's a really good pickup for them. I think that's going to add possibly some really good depth to their goalie situation. So, which they need. They do need.
Yeah. That's a good pickup, I think.
Pittsburgh decided to get younger and went out and got Kevin Hayes. And 2025 second from St. Louis for future considerations.
Yeah, future considerations going back. I don't know if it's the same future considerations that then later went to Ottawa or Dallas. But
so, what do you feel about? And we'll talk about it now, really, because it's not much in free agency. What do you think about what Kyle's doing?
So this is the interesting thing, and I imagine that you probably listened to the recent Dangle podcast where they were talking about the Sidney Crosby stuff.
I disagree, by the way, on the Sydney needs to move. I think.
Yeah, no, I do too, but I think it's a nuanced thing, and I don't think it's black and white, but I do kind of take a little bit of umbrage to them suggesting that there isn't any plan there. I don't know what they're paying attention to. I don't know what they're looking at to say that Washington has retooled or whatever over the last couple of years, and Pittsburgh isn't doing the same thing.
What they've paid attention. I can answer that before you get into it, which is, as a Sharks fan, they haven't. They don't pay attention to markets outside of Toronto. They make generic statements about markets.
No, I think, and look, I understand they're making a podcast for people to get rolled up about stuff. The whole point of obviously that whole discussion was to incite an emotional response in Penguins fans about Sidney Crosby. Yeah. But the reality, and obviously take a pot shot at Carl Dubas, but I think that Dubas has inherited a difficult kind of position in terms of the expectations of that market and of that ownership group. Because coming in last year, obviously, immediately the first few moves, which, will look bad now in hindsight, I didn't love them at the time in terms of extending Jari, making these kind of win now moves and so forth, didn't really pan out. I would still do the Carlson deal again. I would still do some of these things, but added Riley Smith, extended Jari, did these things that didn't, pan out and ended up kind of, not looking great in the fullness of the season. But the job that he was given coming straight in was, this is a team that we're still trying to, get something out of the last few years. We've just re-signed, Malkin. We've just re-signed Letang. We've still got this core here. We want to just try and surround them with guys and have a shot at it. And there's no reason that they couldn't have, basically, if they had a working power play in the last year, they would have been in the same position that Washington was in. That may mean that they might get swept in the first round as well. But if you want to praise Washington for what they did, Pittsburgh's done exactly the same fucking thing.
The other thing was that there was a long stretch in the middle there where you either didn't have anybody in net, or you weren't getting saves. And
that's look, there was a lot of things that went wrong with the season. It's not really important to get into now, but the reality is that it looks like now the directive is to try to make move. It's the most difficult thing to do is to kind of try to retool and to gain assets and to try to get little improvements while still trying to win games. We saw it with the Jake Gensel trade. They acquired a couple of prospects that they liked, that they think can help them in the next couple of years, rather than draft picks that maybe are still 5-10 years off. that they've made this deal here to they had a bit of free space. They've taken on a second round pick by taking on a year of Kevin Hayes, who they obviously believe can play on their roster in the immediate future. They've they've made a handful of deals over the course of the last little while to add picks. They got rid of Riley Smith. They got a second out of that. And they got a fifth out of that. And they got they're trying to start to restock that cupboard. You can't just immediately tear it down and trade away anyone of value on the roster.
This year coming up, you've got one of everything, which you didn't have. Dubas didn't have it. He didn't have.
Yeah, he's started from a huge handicap in terms of not just not having any futures, because that's the reality of this team for the last decade plus. That's always been the case, but also being handicapped by all of the bad contracts that the previous regime brought in. Like, people forget that when they made that Erik Karlsson deal, they got rid of like 3 bad contracts at the same time. They weren't starting from zero. They weren't starting from a team that was making the playoffs. They were starting from a team that was already missing the playoffs, had a whole bunch of shit that they needed to clear out, and they're starting to slowly turn around. It's not going to be a quick process to turn around the Penguins.
And I think the other thing that you threw a few people off with that was, like, Brendon came to us and was good.
Yeah,
but he was good comparatively because he was on the Sharks.
Because he was playing like 20 minutes a night or whatever.
He was our first line center.
Yeah.
Like, by the end of the year, Granlund was playing first line center on the Sharks. He also had a ridiculous shooting percentage, like not one that he would ever be able to replicate. No. So he was on a ridiculous bender because somebody has to put the puck in the net. He was playing first line minutes for San Jose. He was never doing that. Now, if you're on the ice for 20 odd minutes and you're conceding 5 and 6 goals, the chances are you're going to score 2, because eventually score effects kick in. The other team starts managing the game and you put the puck in the net. So a lot of those players suddenly having really good seasons in San Jose had nothing to do with, that was a failed trade. No. They weren't getting any time in Pittsburgh because you couldn't give them time. And if you gave them that time, they wouldn't have done that in Pittsburgh because they weren't getting shelled every night. So I think that overall, I think that Dubas has actually done a really good job. I don't mind the Hayes deal because I think everyone still thinks that Hayes is on the full money. He's not.
He's not. No, he's there at 3.5 for this year and next.
That's fine.
Half of the deal is still getting paid by.
I don't think anyone's ever argued. Again, it's another one of these things. I don't think anyone thinks that Kevin Hayes is a bad player. Kevin Hayes was never worth $7 million.
He's just not a $7 million player. Like, we knew that at the time that the deal was signed. I think that this is the tricky thing, is that, everyone's looking at Pittsburgh going like, they need to get younger, and all this kind of stuff. Like, adding a bunch of like 22-year-olds to this roster isn't going to fix it, isn't going to immediately make them a playoff team or whatever. The reality is that you just need to bring up the cap-friendly page or the Puckpedia page for the Pittsburgh Penguins to see what the plan is. The plan is, in 2 years, most of the contracts are off the books.
There's no money on the books.
Yeah, you want to
to give you an idea. They go from $43 million in forwards to $28 million in forwards, and they go from they lose $7 million on defense as well. So they suddenly in 25-26, everybody's off the books.
Yeah. I mean, look, you can look at this and go, you've got to trade Sidney Crosby, you've got to trade Evgeny Malkin, you've got to trade Chris Letang or whatever. But how much are you realistically getting out of that? Let's say they get a haul of like 4 first-round picks from trading those 3 guys. That's not fixing that team. This team is going to suck for a long fucking time. And nothing that they do in the next 3 years is going to significantly change that. All they're doing is trying to cushion the blow to transition into the start of that absolute teardown rebuild, because whether they like it or not, in a couple of years' time, those players are going to retire. Like, they're going to retire, whether they retire on, whether Crosby retires on the Penguins or he retires on Montreal, whether Malkin retires on Pittsburgh or whether he retires on Florida. I hope, as a fan, that they're still around, because I don't see the huge benefit in trading them at the deadline. If it happens, it happens. I'm not going to be heartbroken about it. But the reality is that this team has always been like steering for the ditch for the entire time that they've been winning. You can't win 3 cups in what is it, 15 years, whatever in that career between 2009 and 2017, that 9 years or something, you can't win 3 cups in that time and not be completely devoid of futures.
And the other really interesting thing is that next year there is a really decent crop of free agents.
I mean, there's no reason that this team couldn't, start to, soften the blow and retool in the same way that the Rangers did.
Yeah, and there are a very good group of free agents. There's a couple of RFAs who I think, most of them. Well, actually, they're all UFAs. So there's a couple of them that I think are gettable. I think there's a couple of them there they could target who are in. Like, I would be shocked if, for example, I think they might go after someone like an Ekblad. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think that might be an area where Kyle Dubas goes, well, what if we get Aaron Ekblad in to play on the back end? What if there's a bunch of really good players there? I think that the plan is don't take on a lot of cap, get the team, see if they can make a playoff run. If they can't make a playoff run, they've at least got the picks that they can then use. And in the meantime, then look at the free agency class. And when you move all the money out, see if there's anything decent that you can put around them to maybe give Sid and Evgeny Malkin one more run at it.
I mean, that's really kind of what this last couple of years has been, and what the next couple of years will be. Is as long as they're there, I think that the ideal scenario is they want to go out like the Sedins. I imagine that Crosby will sign at least one more year. Probably he'll just start signing yearly contracts in the same way that Bergeron.
I can't wait for Toronto to walk Mitch Marner to free agency and for Kyle Dubas to snap him up to play.
That would be fantastic.
And
that would be fantastic.
You know what?
But
we talked about the idea of Penguins doing a Marner trade. Well, they may not need to.
Yeah,
the Leafs might just walk him out the door, and Kyle loves him. So Kyle is very likely to pick up the phone and convince him, hey, would you like to come play with Sidney Crosby? I feel like that might be something that Mitch Marner would answer. Moving on, LA. LA then acquired Tanner Jeannot from Tampa for a 2024 fourth and a 2025 second. I don't know what the Kings are doing, but I really think that it reinforces a lot of people's opinion of their front office that they're not necessarily great. And
they've made some head scratches. To be honest, I mean, look, I don't hate Tanner Jeannot as a player. Obviously, Tampa gave him a pretty significant deal. He doesn't have a heap of. He's just got the 1 year left. I don't think it's a terrible pickup for LA. Obviously, there was no space for him still on Tampa, but I don't know. Some of their moves have been a little surprising to me.
And if you talk to most LA fans, they wanted the whole front office gone at the end of last year because they were like, he didn't add anything to build this team up. It was always going to make the playoffs. Look at where we play, but they were never going to get past. And then Utah. So we knew that Utah.
Well, this was the fun thing at the draft. This was the one thing I think that was the real kind of highlight of the draft to me was like, I think I sent you a message saying Utah are going to be fun.
Yep. So Utah get John Marino from New Jersey for a 2024 second and a 2025 second. And then Utah acquires Mikhail Sergachev from Tampa for JJ Moser, Connor Geekie, and a 2025 second and a 2024 seventh. Interesting. That defense, and we'll get to Utah's other pickups, but they instantly decided to add a top line.
Well, yeah, I mean, like that's a good pairing pickup. Like they basically just immediately picked up a top two, but also a relatively young one. Sergachev is 26, Marino's 27, and
Marino feels older. He feels
Marino feels older, but he came in relatively young. I think he started on the Penguins at like 20, 21, and kind of made the team out of camp and kind of. Unfortunately, I was really disappointed to see him leave because I really felt like, but they were kind of cap crunched and they had to move someone and they moved the wrong player, I think. But the reality is that I think it's also a really interesting defensive core for Utah that they've got a lot of puck movers now between Sergachev, Dursey, Kesselring, Valimaki. I think that they've got a lot of a very dynamic back end now.
I think, and again, we'll obviously talk about the two other big pickups when we talk about the free agency pickups. But I was intrigued by how much money they gave Sean Dursey. That was interesting to me. Ian Cole was the other big pickup, and that was just you pick up Ian Cole because he's Ian Cole. That's fine. That's not an issue. But I think it was like we knew that Utah were going to make some level of splash. It wasn't going to be on the front end or wasn't going to be on the back end. They decided to go back end is what they decided to do. But they made it very plain from their opening press conference that they'd inherited from the Coyotes a bunch of picks. And they were going to weaponize those picks because they had no interest in rebuilding in terms of like, we're going to be here for a couple of years. No. They're like, the rebuild's done. We want to compete. So we're just going to go out and use these picks and weaponize them and bring in a roster and like try to bring in a back end. And they're kind of right. Like there's players on the front, like, Leah Merrill has talked a lot about one of hers, like Matthias Michelli, who is really good and is going.
Yeah, I think that they have some sneaky good players there. I think that they were a sneaky good team for a lot of last year, and with some little ads around the.
It was inconsistency on the back end, like literally, they couldn't defend. They couldn't defend their way out of games.
Yeah,
they could score, but they couldn't defend.
And I think that they've still got a significant amount of cap space. They could still add, a free agent or two to kind of bolster that depth if they want, or they could give some guys, some higher chances. I'd be interested to see what a player like Dylan Genther or anyone else kind of coming up through their system, does with a increased chance.
The other side of this, because everyone's talked about the Utah side of this, JJ Moser and Connor Geekie are really good pickups for Tampa.
Yeah.
I think Tampa's done quite well out of this too, as part of their let's rebuild it as we go. I think JJ Moser is sneaky good, and Connor Geekie's been talked about. I think both of those players have potential to be really good for.
And I think they have value on a cap strap Tampa team as well. For sure.
Oh, really? Yeah. Again, that's the other benefit is that Tampa have been able to sort of move money out to bring in some young players again. It's a bit of
they do need to re-sign Moser though. I don't know what. I think that's going to arbitration. I'm not 100% sure what that deal is going to look like. I can't imagine it's massive.
Yeah, no, I had that up before. I don't think he was one of the players on arbitration. I think they might have already gone back to the negotiations. But
gotcha.
So let's go into some of the free, and we're going to quickly fly through teams, and we're not going to spend a long time on most of them. We're only the notables, so we're not going through everything. Everyone.
Yeah, I tried to list someone for each team. Sometimes there's no one.
So, for example, Anaheim done nothing.
Pretty much nothing there.
Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov in Boston. Lindholm 7 by 7.5. Nikita Zadorov 6 by 5.
Yeah, I think Boston didn't have a lot of options for a center market in the free agency. Like that's kind of the best available guy. Whether or not that solves their problems, either way, it's a big step up from who they had.
I feel like Zadorov was just signed to make Toronto fans freak out because they were talking about wanting him. So I swear they just signed Nikita Zadorov at 6 by 5 because they were like, yeah, now everyone will panic in Toronto. I don't. Yeah, look, I think he's fine. Do I think he's necessarily worth 6 by 5?
Yeah, I still don't know what to make of Boston, honestly. Like, this seems like an improvement on paper, but they've been, like, doing really well with just a team that looks like nothing on paper for a couple of years now. So I just don't know what to make of them.
I think they're a bit – I think the interesting part for me with Boston is I think that Boston got found out in the playoffs. And we talked about it when that Toronto team should have beaten Boston because that was not a good Boston. And what we saw then was Florida absolutely just ran through them. Like they just charged through them.
Boston, by the way, still got to re-sign Swayman, and that's pretty much the
Swayman's getting the rest of the money. Jason Zucker in Buffalo, 1 year at $5 million. Sure, why not? Jason Zucker's got to sign for somebody. It's a rule.
Yeah, they also bought out Jeff Skinner and pretty much just gave that money to Jason Zucker. So that's
sure, cool, whatever. Igor Zhigorovich extended in Calgary 5 at 5.75, and Anthony Manthel 1 year at 3.5 because somebody needs the money in Calgary.
I'm shocked how much free cap space Calgary has. How do they still have 21 million left?
Because I've been telling everyone for the last 2 years, Calgary is terrible, and the fact that their general manager got hired in Toronto is a crime against humanity. because he absolutely left them in a state of desolation, and his reward was Toronto.
It's an interesting one because like you look at their roster and it's pretty much full. They don't have a heap of space like in terms of like actual roster space left to add anyone. They need a goalie still because they traded away Markstrom. I'm not sure if that means that like Dustin Wolf is their goalie of the future, or I don't know what the plan is there for that. Right now.
I still expect that San Jose is going to suck next year.
Yeah,
but there is a very real chance that San Jose finishes ahead of Calgary in the standings. A very real chance, especially if Macklin Celebrini has a year. Like there's a big chance that Calgary could be that bad.
Yeah, I think that there's an interesting argument that they are tear down rebuilding right now.
Yeah, they're just not telling everyone they're doing it. Carolina. So Carolina did what they normally do, which is go out and grab names and put them on the roster and have you go. But how?
Yeah. Like
Jack Roslovic, 1 year at 2.8. William Carrier, 6 years at 2. Gostisbehere, 3 years at 3.2, and Slavin gets his 8 years at 6.396. Sure.
Yeah, I think some reasonable pickups. Like obviously they had some space free up because they couldn't sign Gensel. That was something that they tried to do and ended up, it wasn't going to get done. He ended up going to Florida, to Tampa, which is fair enough. I think that there's still some question marks in Carolina around like kind of what this looks like. They still need to re-sign Marty Nichas, who has gone to arbitration, so that's going to be a big question mark around them.
Yeah, that's still going.
But otherwise, look, I think those are some pretty significantly decent pickups for them.
Yeah. So Chicago, because they need somebody to play with Connor Bedard. So Teuvo Teravainen, 3 years at 5.4 mil.
Yeah, back there after all that time. Like, I know. You're there, back there again.
Full loop. It's like that Boston pick that went back to Boston this year. Tyler Bertuzzi, who was apparently at one point they put out the thing that Bertuzzi and Domi were both going to sign in Toronto, which was never going to happen because Toronto couldn't afford to sign both of them. And so when push came to shove, Tyler Bertuzzi decided that he'd like $5.5 million at 4 years. And it's fair enough too. And TJ Brody, 2 years at 3.75.
I mean, Chicago now, like, looking like an actual NHL roster for the first time in a while. Like, I think it's an interesting situation. Last year and maybe the year before as well, you look down at their roster sometimes and, like, first line, Mike Hardman and, like, just random shit like that where it's just like, who the fuck are these people? I've never heard of half of these guys. Now, like, you look top down, top bottom of the roster, it's at least NHL players, whether or not it's, whether or not this is a team that's sniffing anywhere near the playoffs or whether or not this is, a team that's still rebuilding. I think that there's a more NHL quality product being put on the ice at least.
It's definitely improved. It's definitely improved. Colorado, Eric Brandstrom, 1 year at 900,000. Jonathan Drouin, 1 year at 2.5, and Casey Middlestat, 3 years at 5.75. Yeah. Again,
a lot of bargain basement hunting for Colorado.
They need to fill out that roster with like players that they can afford largely. That's the deal. Columbus, who don't have such concerns. John Monahan, 5 by 5.5. And of course, the man, the myth, the pylon, Jack Johnson, 1 year at 7.75.
Stanley Cup champ. But look, someone was going to pay Sean Monahan that deal. It makes absolute sense that it was Columbus, and it's going to fucking suck. It's going to be bad the entire time.
Dallas have decided that the only way they can sign players is if they have the same initials. So they sign Matt Dumba and Matt Duchesne. Dumba gets 2 years at 3.75. Duchesne gets 1 year at $3 million. That just feels like the now perennial Matt Duchesne contract.
Yeah, pretty much. You want another year, Matt? All right, yeah.
Matt Duchesne gets his 1 year, $3 million. We move on. Matt Dumba, though, like I do want to mention again. We talked about it last year when, like, at the trade deadline, how Matt Dumba's stock has just sort of disappeared. Yeah. Remember a couple of years ago where it was like, oh, you can get a first and all this and this and this for Matt Dumba, and then last year at the deadline you couldn't give him away.
Yeah, and then he basically just had like a completely invisible year in Arizona.
Yeah, he just vanished into thin air. And I think Arizona got him on the basis of, well, we can trade him.
Yeah.
Not really. Not really.
No.
So Detroit. Now, interestingly enough, probably I would suggest our most followed team by people who pay attention to the podcast. Tim definitely, who's, always here. But other people I know, there's a lot of Detroit fans who comment on our stuff. Vladimir Tarasenko, 2 years at 4.75. Patrick Kane extended 1 year at $4 million. I would like anybody from Detroit with a straight face to tell me that Steve Yzerman knows exactly what he's doing and this is all part of the plan. Because I have had to sit there and watch Detroit fans tell everyone that he's playing 4D chess and this team's going to be amazing. Can't wait to see what he's cooking. Is that it? Is that it? Vladimir Tarasenko, 2 years, 4.75. Patrick Kane for another year at 4.
There's some puzzling things on the Detroit roster. If you bring up their page right now, they've currently got 9 forwards signed, including those guys that we just talked about. They still have RFA signings in Lucas Raymond and Joseph Leno, and they have to sign Moritz Seider, who's probably going to eat up a large portion of the remaining cap. They currently have 4 NHL goalies on the roster. I don't understand what the fuck they are doing. They have basically Cam Talbot is the only guy with 2 years, and
they grabbed Cam Talbot
deals for Husso, Lyon, and Jack Campbell. I don't know if they're just going to throw these guys in the pit and see who makes it out.
They grabbed Talbot and Campbell, so they had Husso and they had Lyon. I really don't get what's going on here. After they re-sign these guys, they're going to have a little bit of space left to maybe add a couple of other forwards, but there's a lot of whatever still on this roster. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. Maybe I'm slightly insulted that apparently the same deal was offered to Tarasenko in Pittsburgh and he chose Detroit. But I don't understand what this team's long-term goal is here. My thing is Detroit, on the offensive side of the puck, Detroit seem to be going down a path of signing players that other teams start to rehab. Then they take them. But before they've proven that it's consistent. So Andrew Kopp, for example, and again, the same team did the work. The Rangers have done the work a couple of times now. And Detroit's gone, well, we'll take them now. But without consistent proof that this is where they're at. Is it a rebound? Is it a situational thing? No one's going to pay a lot of money for them and put them on long contracts. And I feel like there's been so many years where there was the Yzer plan and he's putting these pieces in place, and then everyone lost patience and was like, he's got to move it. And we said the same thing. He does have to move it. You can't stay in that position forever.
No.
But it just feels like he hasn't been able to accelerate out of that. And he's
I think that they thought that they were going to be a playoff team by now.
And because they haven't been able to push for the playoffs, he can't get the free agents he thought he was going to get. Yeah. The other thing is, too, I think their biggest issue is look at that defense.
Yeah, it's not impressive. I mean,
you tell me that with these, Moritz Seider is the best thing there.
I could take or leave anyone apart from Moritz Seider on that.
Are you looking forward to a pairing of Ben Sherratt with either Justin Hall or Olli Mata?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's another guy that they picked up expecting that, he was going to be great. And,
I don't see it. At this point in time, I think that Steve Yzerman he's really living on that Tampa reputation. But surely by this point in time, people in Detroit have to be looking at this situation now and going, we love him. He's a hero. But this isn't working. This is just not working because they don't have the piece that's able to, we talk about, again, we'll bring them up because they're coming up next anyway. But Edmonton, my thing with Edmonton, we've both had the same view with Edmonton, which is when Edmonton's a bit crappy, they've still got McDavid. They've still got Draisaitl. And those two can win you games. For example, I like Dylan Larkin. But Dylan Larkin is not going to Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl you out of a slump. He's
No.
just not. But they don't have that player. And I think it's like Yzerman is building. Like when he in Tampa, he had those players. He had a Stamkos who could do that for you. He had, wingers who could score ridiculous numbers of goals. He had Kucherov. He had these players that could do that for him. And he doesn't have them here. And their drafting's been a bit hit and miss.
Yeah.
So I think that this year's a really big year in Detroit. And we've said that a couple of times, but I think genuinely this time they might lose the room. Edmonton have actually made a bunch of really good signings if you don't pay attention to the fact there's nobody to play in the bottom six. So Jeff Skinner, 1 year, $3 million. Victor Arvidsson, 2 years at $4 million. Mattias Janmark, 3 years, 1.45. Adam Henrique gets 2 years at $3 million. Corey Perry gets 1 at 1.15. I mean, look, the Corey Perry signing is fantastic because it guarantees to the rest of us they're not going to win the cup. But,
yeah, I mean, look, I like what they've done. Like we talked about in the last episode, are they going to be able to bring back these guys that we thought they were going to lose a lot of them? Obviously they've been able to retain a whole bunch of guys that we weren't necessarily expecting. They've moved out some money. They would obviously still like to move that Kane contract. That would help.
They're still over.
Yeah, but adding Skinner and Arvidsson, that's talent that I wasn't expecting them to be able to add in this free agent crop. Retaining, I just figured they'd retain Henrique and Janmark and maybe a couple of other bottom six guys, and that'd kind of be it. But I think that that's probably helped them out a lot in terms of depth. Whether or not this is a significantly improved team over the guys that they lost, I don't know. Well, I guess we'll wait and see. There's some question marks. Obviously, Jeff Skinner was just bought out for a reason, and Arvidsson is not a world beater, but I think some good players that they picked up and added to a roster that needed them.
I still have massive question marks over their defense and goaltending.
I mean, look, obviously they're still there.
I think the other thing that is not being discussed right now, because everyone's talking about the Draisaitl contract and what that's going to look like, and is he going to sign one? And there's a lot of conversation around, is he actually going to sign the deal, or are they going to have to move him so they don't lose him for nothing? Which they're not going to move Leon Draisaitl. That's just not going to happen. But I think the one that everyone's forgetting right now too is that like Evan Bouchard at the moment can pretty much go up with a blank checkbook, and Bouchard is an RFA, but Bouchard is up next year.
Yeah.
So they've got Draisaitl and Bouchard coming off the books next year. They've both got to get paid. Then you've got the year after is Connor. So
I would imagine that this year is the year that they really try hard to get back to the cup final, because it's not going to get any easier after this. I think that what's impressive is they haven't taken a bigger step back, really.
No, I think they've done a very good job. I think the gamble for them is Corey Perry going to like hold at a level? Is Mattias Janmark going to be, able to keep going where he was? What is Arvidsson?
Yeah, obviously hasn't been the player that he has for If a bunch of those bottom six guys take a step back too, which is entirely possible because they're
don't know. And the thing is, we don't know what Jeff Skinner really is anymore. Yeah. We don't know. Like, we'll find out. We're about to find out. I would suggest with if Connor McDavid's feeding the puck, I'm going to suggest he's a lot better. Because
if people want to criticize the teams for getting older, like every single one of these guys is 31, 32 or older.
And I like Zach Hyman. I know a lot of people went, Zach Hyman's scoring is compared to the rest of his career. He's compared to the rest of his career is anomalous, and largely because he was the open man standing in front of a net because Connor McDavid set him up, which is what you want, and you can't criticize him for that. Jeff Skinner could have that sort of season. So it's interesting to see. My big question is what happens when you move those players away from the big two? That's my question. But that's my question with everyone in Edmonton. So we'll see what happens. Florida, Sam Reinhart gets his extension, 8x8, 625. He was always getting that. Like they won the cup, and it was like, well, we're just going to give all the money to Reinhart and Antoine Lundell. Lundell gets 6 years at $5 million. Sure,
I think that's fine. Look, those were obviously key players on their team, and they paid them.
Sam Reinhart literally scored the cup-winning goal. So sure, cool, great, whatever. LA Warren Fogle, 3 years at 3.5.
That's really the best thing they did. That's it.
LA, as I said, I don't get it. And like the Byfield contract's almost up, and like there's a lot of question marks in LA, and they might be a team that takes a step back. So we'll see what happens there. The problem is for them to take a step back, one of Calgary, Anaheim, or San Jose has to take a step forward. And I don't think that's going to happen. Seattle's the other one who could do that, obviously.
Yeah.
Minnesota. Jake Middleton gets his extension, 4 years at 4.35.
It is what it is.
Contract, it's fine. Slavkovsky in Montreal gets 8 by 7.6.
This is an interesting one because I think that, look, a lot of people are pointing at this and going like, oh, this could end up being a really, cheap deal in a few years' time. I don't think that Slavkovsky has necessarily proven that he's that player yet. But I don't mind taking this kind of swing on him. Obviously, 50-point season last year, 20 goals, 30 assists. Could he, develop from there? He's obviously still 20 years old. Could he develop from here over the next 8 years for that to be a bargain? Absolutely. Could it end up being a shit, contract? It's also possible. But I think that if it is, Montreal are fucked anyway because they took him first overall. So basically they're all in.
Yeah, they're just doubling down on their pick, and
that's really all it is. Like they're in the shit if this doesn't work out, regardless of what they pay him.
Look, Montreal. What you do have to say about Montreal is that at least for everyone to talk about, is there a plan? Is there not a plan? There's a plan in Montreal, which is they've got their young guys, and they've decided that they are running with their young guys. Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield. Now, obviously, Slavkovsky, they're running Kirby Duck. They're running with the young guys. They're putting the money on Alex Newhook. Like, they're running with these guys.
These guys, I don't think any of these guys are guaranteed superstars, but they're taking a swing. They're taking a swing on it.
And look, it's a plan, and it's better than some teams have done. I have no issue with that. Speaking of teams, however, that had a plan, Barry Trotz spent a lot of last year emptying out cap.
Yeah.
Made the playoffs while emptying out cap.
Yeah.
Barry Trotz goes out and gets Steven Stamkos, 4 years at $8 million. Brady Shea, Nashville, 7 years, $7 million. Jonathan Marchessault, 5 years at 5.5. UC Saros gets his extension, 8 years at 7.7. Nashville has looked at the Central and gone, yep.
Yeah, I mean, look, no one had a more impressive offseason than Nashville. They made a bunch of big pickups, adding, 2 top 6 pieces, adding a top, 4 defensemen, and extending one of the best goalies in the league. Like, you can't really do much better than that.
Saros extension's brilliant. 8 years at 7.7. That's really good.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, they're considering, like, I would say there's question marks around like the rest of their roster, but considering how well that roster did, they were running what looked on paper like an AHL team for the vast majority of the year and winning. So adding this to what was a winning team, I think that's a good deal for them. Obviously, Stamkos is 34. You're buying his 35 to 38 seasons, which is not necessarily.
And you're buying his injury. And you're buying his injury history.
Yeah, you're buying Marchessault's 34 to 38 seasons as well. Look, that's kind of not the best portion of their contracts or anything of their deals, but look, I think that team's taken a significant step forward for the next year.
I think the other thing is too, like Jonathan Marchessault will be jumping up and down. He'll finally be like, think about it. He's got a center.
Yeah.
He's got a center. He did all of that stuff he did in Vegas, really not with a permanent center.
Well, look, watch him play with Tommy Novak next year. Like, watch him. he'll be with Colton Sissons or Tommy Novak, absolutely guaranteed.
So New Jersey, well, they start off by going out and signing, the most mobster name they can. They go and get Brett Pesce. New Jersey, 6 years at 5.5. Thomas Tatar, 1 year at 1.8 extended. Brendon Dillon gets 3 years at $4 million. That feels like too much for Brendon Dillon, but it genuinely does.
Yeah, I think for what they needed, they added some good pieces there.
From what I understand, Brendon Dillon only had 2 real offers on the table. One was New Jersey. The other was, would you like to come back to San Jose where you briefly stayed? And he went, no, I'll go to Jersey.
Yeah, it's actually Brendan Dillon appeared on the Hockey PDO cast in the last week, talking to Filipovic about the off season and about UFA and stuff. It was quite interesting to kind of see it from a player perspective. So shout out to him for that. That was interesting. But look, obviously this was a good team on paper last year, and they sucked. So I don't know what the fuck to make of New Jersey.
I think they'll be better because of their goalie situation, but
I think so too. Yeah, I think that they've hit the reset button, and they'll probably be good. I'm usually right about teams a year later, I think that probably my prediction for them last year will probably be what they do this year.
Which is disappointing for me because I had a first round pick riding on it. But the thing I'm most disappointed about in this offseason is that nobody had a camera on the negotiations for Anthony Duclair. Because, of course, as we know, Anthony Duclair is his own manager. So we had missed out on the idea of Anthony Duclair sitting down with Lou Lamoriello to negotiate $4 million at 3.5. 4 years at 3.5. We missed the opportunity for Duclair and Lamoriello in a room.
To be a fly on the wall in that.
I wanted that negotiation so much. Look, I like the fact that Anthony Duclair bets on himself so hard. I absolutely love that for him, and it's worked largely. Remember, there was all that crap about what he needs an agent. No, he doesn't. The Rangers have done nothing, largely the Rangers have done nothing because again they're waiting for Trouba to work out what he's doing. Ottawa, so David Perron, Ottawa 2 years at $4 million. Shane Pinto's extended 2 years at $3.75. We talked about Ottawa's big move anyway because it happened just before the Cup final where they went out and got themselves a starting goaltender. So Perron's a decent little signing. Shane Pinto extension is good value.
They pretty much replaced the Tarasenko role with Perron. That's basically what Ottawa did. I imagine they're pretty much the same team.
The Flyers did nothing from this year, but
no,
they did, however, sign Matvei Michkov to an entry-level contract. So
they convinced him to come over from the K, and that's probably the biggest ad that they could have made. So I'm still very disappointed that he went to Florida to Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I was prepared for San Jose to take a flyer on him at one point. I was ready for it. So Pittsburgh, Anthony Beauvillier, 1 year at 125. Blake Lizotte, 2 years at 185. Matt Grzelcyk, 1 year at 275. Again, as we said, depth with no real cost.
Yeah, look, I think that those are reasonable short-term pickups for them. I don't mind any of those guys. Blake Lizotte's another one of those bottom six defensive guys that Dubas seems to love. And I like Beauvillier as a redemption kind of thing. I think that's that's a pretty cheap there's a lot of those guys that pick up, see if it turns into something. If not, it's a year and it's no worse than what you had.
Now your San Jose Sharks, because they're everybody's now. They belong to everybody. Macklin Celebrini signed his ELC. So does Will Smith. So we've got both of them next year coming up. They will not see the Barracuda. There's no way they see the Barracuda. They're playing. They said that after the rookie tournament, Celebrini said he turned up to day one, and he said by the end of day one he knew that he was coming out and he was going to play. I like Will Smith saying I've had to play against Macklin in junior, and I'm really happy now that I don't have to do that anymore. So Tyler Toffoli, 4 years at $6 million because we've got money and would like somebody who can put a puck in the net.
Yep.
Also, Alex Wenberg, 2 years at $5 million because we've got money and we'd like someone who can put a puck in the net, please. I'm happy with all that because we're still so far under the cap, it's ridiculous. We can still sign players. I think on my Puck GM thing on Puckpedia, I think I even added Tyson Barrie to the decor. Because he's still sitting out there. And I think I gave him a contract at 3.5 because we've got the money. And
why not?
I looked at it and went, you give Tyson Barrie a 1 year prove-it deal and you can trade him at the deadline for assets because somebody's going to want him to quarterback their power play. So I still think San Jose is not finished yet in terms of, I think they'll sign some players. I also think that someone is going to trade for Mario Ferraro because I think someone's an idiot. I don't know who it is, but someone's an idiot. Seattle, these two feel, it sounds weird to say this.
Yeah.
I think these two feel like the biggest gambles. Chandler Stevenson, 7 years at 6.25.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big way from, he was a waiver claim by
Yep.
Vegas a long time ago from Washington. And, he made his way into being like a top 6 guy for them. But
He's not fast anymore.
yeah, I'm curious about this one. I feel I see him as more of a complimentary guy, but honestly, Seattle
Statistically,
is
his
a
pace has
team of
dropped.
Seattle is an entire team of complimentary guys. So he'll probably fit right in.
And 7 years at 7.142 for Brendon Montour. I think that both of these, again, I don't know why it feels like such a massive gamble on both of them. So Chandler Stevenson, for me, his big sort of thing that broke him apart from everyone was pace, and he doesn't have it anymore. Statistically, like there was a sizable statistic drop off in his pace from last year. Montour, look, he was always going to sort of be the belle of the ball this year in terms of defensemen.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see if that means that he's taking over their power play in Seattle. Whether or not that's a good thing or not, I don't know. Seattle is just a definition of mid as a team.
Yeah, I still don't understand what Seattle is. They're weirdly built. Buchnevich gets his 6 years at $8 million extension in St. Louis because they like paying people. And look, he's been fine there. Buchnevich
he's been good. Yeah,
yeah. Now, Tampa, Gensel, we mentioned before, 7 years, $9 million. Victor Hedman extends 4 years at $8 million because when you want to stay in Tampa, why not?
Yeah, and that's starting next year.
Yeah, Cam Atkinson, 1 year, $900,000.
That was really the like kind of depth addition that they made. There isn't a lot of space in Tampa left.
Yeah, like it was really interesting too because Cam Atkinson had been talked about to about 7 different teams, none of whom were good. And then suddenly he ends up in Tampa. And it's like, yeah, well, why not? Yeah. Toronto. So we mentioned Chris Tanev, 6 years at 4.5. OEL goes to Toronto, 4 years at 3.5. Max Domi gets a 4-year, 3.75 extension. And Anthony Stollart's in net 2 years at 2.5. Okay. I don't care what they've done there. I think that they've added a lot of money and they've added pieces. They've added Tanev and OEL they kind of needed. I love the fact that OEL is now a piece that people need as opposed to the cap dump that he was when they got rid of it, when he was got rid of the last time. The Domi extension, sure, why not?
If you want to talk about another couple of additions, they also added Yanni Hakanpää 2 years.
Yeah, well, hang on, because no, they didn't.
Oh,
it hasn't gone through yet. There's a whole controversy about Yanni Hakanpää where they seem to have they added a couple of the other younger pieces, and the younger pieces they add are Yanni Hakanpää's contract hit exactly, and he's not been added to their roster officially on the Maple Leaf side of things. He was on cap friendly. He wasn't signed there because the suggestion was that they went to sign him, and apparently Treliving said at his press conference that about Hakanpää possibly coming in, but the instant thing that came out about Hakanpää when someone said that he was signing for the Leafs was, I'm surprised his knees are dust.
Oh, okay.
So the suggestion is that he basically
didn't fail the physical or something.
Wouldn't pass or hasn't passed the physical, and there's some hold up there. So they may not have Yanni Hakanpää. No one knows.
I mean, look, that's fair because they have like 9 defensemen on their roster now, and I don't understand why they need so many.
And I still think that it's a team that needs players who can score in the playoffs, that didn't add players who can score in the playoffs. Nick Robertson wants a trade because he wasn't getting played last year. And like, again, listening to the Dangle podcast do their whole, we just tell him that he stays in or get an opportunity. No. Like, you had your chance. You told him that last time. He's not going to do it again. Don't care if it's a new coach. Also, I can't think that Craig Berube is going to be a Nick Robertson kind of guy. Doesn't feel like it to me. So they're kind of shafted, and it looks like they're going to keep their core 4. Which is
I mean, that's the thing. Like, unless something comes out of the ether, it doesn't. It kind of seems like they're just running.
How are they going to add goals? Like, they need to score in the playoffs. The problem here's the other interesting part about this: defensively in the playoffs, they were largely fine. They couldn't score. So, like, no, we'll just add those players. I think Toronto has a lost cause at this point in time anyway. So, Utah, Ian Cole, 1 year at 3.1. Sean Dursey, 4 years at 6. I still think that's a lot of money to pay Sean Dursey.
Especially considering that he's kind of, lost a significant role by bringing in Sergachev.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, they had a fair amount of money, and there's not a lot of money on the back end, so it's not the end of the world.
Jake DeBrusk in Vancouver, 7 years at 5.5. And Danton Heinen, 2 years at 2.25.
It feels like a Vancouver move. It feels like a classic Vancouver move to
Jake
add,
DeBrusk?
Jake DeBrusk and
Yeah.
Danton Heinen.
That feels exactly like you'd think it would. I don't hate them as a move.
No, yeah, I like those players, but
Yeah.
7 years is a long fucking time.
Vegas confirming, of course, they have no money by paying Akira Schmidt 2 years at 8.75 and Victor Olofsson 1 year at 1. So Washington's 6 years at 5.75. Washington had money. And Logan Stanley in Winnipeg. Were they paying him by the foot?
I think so. I think that's the rate. 2 years
at 1.25.
Yeah, and still 6'7". Every day he gets out of bed.
I think that Winnipeg.
That's the best thing about him.
I think that Winnipeg are a really dangerous prospect to drop off the face of the earth. I don't see it.
Yeah.
I do not see it. I do not understand it. It makes absolutely zero sense to me.
Well, let's talk about who's your biggest winners of free agency. Like who's who improved the most, who actually made a significant difference to their team.
So I'm including draft and free agency together. I think that I'm going to say the Sharks straight up because the Sharks got their future.
I mean, there's a few teams that it was difficult to get worse, like the Sharks in Chicago. Like anyone that you added was going to be an improvement.
I think that Washington did improve. I think Edmonton did a really good job with the situation they had. I think they actually did a very good job of retooling on the fly. I don't hate what Tampa did.
I think that they did a pretty reasonable job.
I think it's sneaky. I actually think it's sneaky clever what they did. So I like those teams. I know I like Nashville's. Because I just
I think Nashville and Utah for them are probably the ones that made like the most significant on ice difference in terms of their in terms of their team.
My least favorites are Detroit and Winnipeg. I just don't understand what those two clubs are doing. I don't get it. Calgary, but I figured that Calgary was on the slide already anyway. But I feel like Detroit needed to take a step forward and hasn't. And I think that Winnipeg's just I think that Winnipeg believe that sort of weird bender they went on towards the end of the year is real. I think they're having Montreal syndrome.
Yeah.
And we sort of know what happened to Montreal. The last thing I'm going to leave us with, just before we go, the last quick thing I'm going to leave us with is Jay Fresh put out his predictions for what he thinks is going to happen in terms.
Well, I mean, I think it's his model. I don't think that it's his personal predictions.
Yeah, it's Jay Fresh. You can never be sure.
It's definitely a computer model.
I think a lot of this model's utter crap. I think Winnipeg being third in the Central is not a hope in hell. I think Nashville being that low down in the Central is not a hope in hell.
So the thing you got to remember about a lot of models is that usually it's like a 3-year average that heavily weights the last year. So you're gonna see a lot of teams that are pushed down by their most recent kind of numbers and up by their kind of recent finishing and so forth. So but like it doesn't surprise me that a model really likes New Jersey and Carolina on paper. Obviously, that's kind of thrown out some of the the recent results and stuff. It doesn't shock me a lot of this stuff. There's a few here that are it's clearly not going to happen. It's clearly not going to be that case. I mean, Jay Fresh is a Penguins fan. If this was his opinion, there's no way that he would put the Islanders and Washington over Pittsburgh.
I thought that some of his draft analysis was a bit weird compared to previous years. And I get why it's the model, but he had a couple of them where it was just like really either way down compared to everyone else or way up compared to everyone else, and including other models. And normally it's a bit closer. I don't mind that in terms of points of difference, but it was like he was just so insistent.
I mean, look, I don't think that his is one of the best performing models necessarily. I haven't looked recently to see. I think that usually Usually Dom's is pretty good.
I think Minnesota's way. I think the Central's very out of whack.
The Central seems odd to me for sure. I mean, St. Louis seems low to me as well.
Yeah, Minnesota seems high. Winnipeg.
I like that Utah still says Arizona on the.
I think the Atlantic. I mean, look. I think the part of the issue too is I think there are some divisions here like the Pacific and the Atlantic. It's like, okay, but if teams take a step back, who's taking the step forward? I don't think that Toronto will come second in the Atlantic. I genuinely don't. I think they'll drop back a little bit, but
I suspect Tampa's probably a little bit higher on that list as well.
Yeah, I think the Tampa's a lot better than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for after the moves they made. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the Stamkos factor as well.
Yeah.
And people thinking that, they're losing Stamkos, so they're losing. Yeah, but he's getting older, they're gaining. So that'll do it. Yeah, that'll do us for this week. So we'll be back. We will come up with a schedule for the off season where we'll do some off season pods, and we'll drop those off season pods. We're gonna give us some suggestions, by the way, for anything you want us to do in the off season, documentaries and stuff like that. I do want to talk about the Saving Sakic documentary, which came out during the season. I think that's a really good one. But if you've got anything you want us to have a look at, I said I'm looking at the idea of some old Avco Cup, for example. I think that WHA finals are really good fun. So maybe we'll do something along those lines. But if you've got any ideas you want us to cover, please do let us know. It's very easy to let us know. You can hit us up on all the social medias. Obviously, Twitter's a really easy one. So @Shift Extra, or if you're in the Australian NHL Facebook fans group on Facebook, hit us up with a message there. We're very easy to find. You all know where we are. So that'll do us for this time. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll catch you all later.
See ya.